Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am D.
And I'm G.
I always get confused because I'm second in the list and I start to say that I'm G, but I could never be G because there's
Right.
only one G man. So we want to welcome everybody to another edition. Like I said before, got a lot of topics, a few topics anyway. We'll see how many of them we get through tonight because as we've talked about, 3 weeks out from the actual election day, the official election day. But I always like to note that voting is going on right now as we speak.
Yep.
In fact, 10%, which is about 14 million votes, have been cast already, which is 10% of the total vote count from the last presidential election in 2016. So great job to our fellow citizens. I don't know, G-Man, if you've gotten your ballot yet to vote.
I did. I got it 2 days ago in the mail, and Colorado has a lengthy ballot this year, so I'm still going through it and trying to figure out how I'm going to vote on some of our ballot measures. But
fantastic. Well, we're going to be probably voting early in person, I think is what we're going to do.
right now, you guys don't have mail-in ballot there in Oklahoma, right?
We do have an absentee ballot you can request, but it's not,
right.
Everybody doesn't get it, but you can request it if
Right.
you want. We did, surprisingly, I was shocked. The voters, if I can spit this out, the voters voted in February in one of our elections that we had, election dates in February. They voted to overturn the law saying that you had to have your ballots notarized.
Right.
And then no, actually, then it was sued. It was in the courts. It was in the Oklahoma Supreme Court. The Oklahoma Supreme Court threw it out and said you no longer had to have absentee ballots notarized because of the undue financial burden, that you just had to have a witness.
Right.
And then the legislature came right in behind it and passed it again as a bill, and did that. Now, our governor, who is pretty conservative Republican, actually waived that requirement through executive action. He had emergency powers during the pandemic, and he waived it because of COVID and the primaries, the congressional primaries that took place in July and August, and then now he's done it again for the presidential. He's waived that requirement, which I think is it's good for him. I mean, I didn't expect it at all. So
Right. Yeah,
so
we
let's
don't
get
even have to have a witness in Colorado. You just fill out your ballot, sign it, put it in the secure sleeve, they call it, I think. And,
yeah, you can't do not send in a naked ballot.
Right. Do not send in a naked ballot. And drop it off or drop it in the mail. So
awesome.
we're one of the states leading the nation in voter fraud.
You're leading that's fully tongue in cheek, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've been doing this for a number of years now, and
I don't want
no major problems.
I don't want you to go back to the good old days of voter fraud like Lindsey Graham.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about, and this will be our big topic for today. We've got a Supreme Court justice nomination hearing taking place, started this week, and 3 weeks before an election, we've got somebody being considered for a lifetime appointment on the highest court in the land. If the polling holds, in which we know there can be surprises, but if the polling holds, it's going to be nominated by a president who's going to go down in defeat,
right?
Yeah, for re-election. So overall thoughts on the first 3 days of the SCOTUS nomination battle?
Well, I think where we are is that most Supreme Court nominees have been coached to not say a word. So, they say as little as possible. They tout their bona fides for the law and how much they know about this case or that case, and, stare decisis and a bunch of legal terms that the rest of us are scratching our heads going, what the heck is that? But when you ask them real life questions like, hey, Judge Barrett, how do you feel about same-sex marriage? Oh, I could never answer that, even though she has a litany of work that outlines exactly how she feels about it. She's totally against it. Anybody that thinks that Obamacare is safe, Roe v. Wade is safe, or gay marriage is safe has got another thing coming. Those things are going down. They're going to go down hard. and our country is going to go right back to where it was in the 1970s and 80s.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be a lot of things, a lot of ramifications to this nomination, and I find it very interesting that she doesn't feel like she can give her beliefs on any of these issues because the case might come before her. But there were other cases that she was willing to talk about. Now, Loving v. Virginia was one
Right.
that she said was decided correctly. There's a few others, but she would not commit on her caseloads. And I just wish that the nominees would be honest. And they try to invoke Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and they say the Ginsburg rule about not saying how you would rule on a case. There's a difference between saying not how you would rule and what your belief is on something.
Right.
There were questions that were chilling to me that she would not answer. Simple questions, and I think Cory Booker said it, so I don't want to steal the line from him, but that it's amazing that are you even asking this question in a confirmation hearing. But it's amazing to me that she would not answer the question: does the Constitution give the president the absolute right to pardon himself for past or future crimes? She wouldn't answer that question. She
Right.
wouldn't answer the question of, does the president have the unilateral authority to cancel or move an election? Wouldn't answer
Right.
that question. Wouldn't answer the question about whether she would recuse herself if the case comes before the court. And what I find really interesting was in Amy Klobuchar's, senator from Minnesota, her questioning today, where I didn't know this, and I follow this pretty closely, but if she is allowed to join the court, she will be one of three former attorneys, the first being John Roberts, second being
Yep.
Brett Kavanaugh, and her, that worked on Bush v. Gore.
Right.
And that
in
filed
the Bush camp.
legal arguments to stop the recount,
Yep.
and basically caused the Supreme Court and made that case to the Supreme Court, where the conservatives on the Supreme Court stopped the count,
Right.
stopped the recount. They declared George Bush the winner, George W. Bush, and we had a president. And people forget this because they think they look back on W now and they think he's warm and cuddly and he's friendly with Michelle Obama and what a nice guy, and because they're comparing him to Trump. But they forget that that guy was illegally elected.
Yep.
And never should have been in office.
Yep.
And he was elected by court. He wasn't elected by the Electoral College.
Right.
Wasn't elected by the people. He was elected by a judicial decision. And Trump's already alluded to the fact that he thinks that he thinks there's fraud. He thinks all this, and he said it's going to end up in the Supreme Court. That's why we need 9 instead of 8.
Right. Well, because I guess they don't think they can depend on Roberts, and I can answer those questions for you. So Trump absolutely can pardon himself. The Constitution allows that. There's no stipulations. He cannot pardon himself for future crimes. He can pardon himself for crimes that he committed while in office or before in office, and it only protects him at the federal level. So the cases going forward in New York, he would still have to answer those and potentially go to prison for. The second question was,
can he unilaterally move an election?
Yes, he cannot. That's mandated by the Constitution. He cannot do that. And then the third question was, will she recuse herself? She absolutely will not.
Yeah. And the thing about the recusal, she said she needs to, she'll have to consult with legal scholars and consult with, all different case precedent, this, that, and the other. When it comes to recusal, the recusal decision is made by one person.
Yep.
And one person alone, and it's made by that judge.
Yep.
That judge is she's the only person who's going to make that decision. Now, the decision might be made for her. She might be being told, now, if I appoint you as a Supreme Court justice, you have to promise me you will not recuse yourself. That could have happened. It could have been a quid pro quo.
It could be. Yep.
She claims that she's not made any promises whatsoever to anyone and not been asked to make any promises either.
Right. Well, how are you going to answer that? Well, Trump offered, but I declined. I mean, she knows how to play the game. I mean, she's fairly well polished. I noticed a lot of people are saying she's been on the bench for 3 years. What a resume, right? So you're
Right.
going to put somebody who's got 3 years of judicial experience on the highest court in the land. I mean, she's really well qualified. Let's make no mistake. Republicans picked this person and they're jamming her through to get rid of the things that we just said they want to get rid of. They've wanted to get rid of Roe v. Wade for a while. They want to get rid of gay marriage, and they want to get rid of Obamacare. I mean, they've tried to do it.
They've tried 70 times legislatively to get rid of Obamacare,
Right.
and they lost every time. And they even had a case where John Roberts disappointed them and wasn't part of their fan fiction
Right.
Supreme Court graphic novel where he would be the hero and help them strike down the evil Obamacare. But that case is going to be heard on November 10th. So 1 week after the election, the official election day, the case is going to be heard. Most likely she's going to be seated on the court by then. And
Well, barring a COVID outbreak, I'm guessing she will be.
And there will be hell to pay because there's no plan, there's nothing in place for all the people who will lose their coverage. And Republicans want to say that it's a judicial doctrine. That's why the law can't stand, because one piece, the individual mandate, was cut out. So therefore the whole thing has to be ruled unconstitutional. And you have to stop and think, what does that really mean? That means when they say the whole thing's got to be thrown out, that means that pre-existing condition coverage is no longer guaranteed.
Yep. Can't
that
keep
means
kids
that
on your insurance till they're 26 anymore.
That means that insurance companies or employers, anyone, not just religious zealots, anyone can say, we're not covering birth control, we're not covering breast exams. It's just too expensive for us to do those well women checkups or anything like that,
Right.
any cancer screenings. And it's interesting because COVID now can be considered a pre-existing condition. So you have
Right.
over 7 million US citizens that would be able to be thrown off their insurance and not be covered because they had COVID previously. And don't kid yourself. They're saying now, there's no one knows how she's going to rule. If they didn't know how she was going to rule, they wouldn't be pushing her through right now.
Right, absolutely.
And the key on that is they're saying, it doesn't mean Obamacare is going to be overturned. It doesn't mean Roe v. Wade's going to be overturned. It doesn't mean any of those things. But don't kid yourself. They'll light cigars and lift their glasses when Obamacare gets overturned. And they'll be celebrating the fact that people are going to be dying.
Right. Yeah. And, just the hypocrisy is what gets me. I mean, how they can do that. I mean, I heard Ted Cruz on NPR today talking about, we don't know how she's going to rule. And, just because she's written these things in the past doesn't mean that as a justice, she's going to rule that way. Well, come on. I mean, just because I like chicken fried steak doesn't mean I'm going to eat it tomorrow. That's BS. I'll eat it whenever I get my chance. I love the stuff, right? And the same thing for her. The leopard doesn't change her spots. She's going to vote just the way she has written about. There's a reason that ultra conservative religious organization she belongs to, I can't think of the name of it right off, scrubbed their website of all her contributions because they're highly controversial. And if people saw them, they'd be outraged at what she really thinks.
People of Praise, I think, is the group she's a part of.
People of Praise, yeah, correct.
Yeah, and the crocodile tears from Ted Cruz. I mean, and what's funny to me is the Republicans keep decrying that she shouldn't be discriminated against based on her religion, and she shouldn't be castigated because of her religion. The only people I hear talking about religion are Republicans. I don't hear any of the Democrats saying anything about her religion. They're asking about her viewpoints because they want to have it both ways. And that's the Republican way, by the way. But they want to have it both ways because they want to say political party, political ideology should not matter, right? It shouldn't matter. We should say she's a well-qualified judge. She meets all these criteria. Therefore, she's passed all the background checks, all that. She should be admitted to the bench
Right.
because the president put her forward. Politics shouldn't matter. Yet their justification for nominating her and blocking Merrick Garland was the fact that the political parties were different.
Right.
That Barack Obama's political party was different than the Senate majority's political party. So what is it? Does politics play in it or does it not play in it?
Right.
And I will say this, they keep wanting to say precedent, that it's happened in an election year. It's happened. It has never, and I'll say this again, it has never happened this close to an election ever
Right.
before. I believe
Well,
the cutoff was around, it's never happened 90 days before an election.
right. Well, and if I was the Democrats, which, like we said, if the polls hold, and we'll see how things turn out here in about 19 days, we could be looking at a blue tsunami, which would make those lawsuits moot, hopefully. But if the Democrats get control in January, the first thing I would do is I would bring in 7 or 8 Supreme Court nominees, and I would pack the court. That'd be the first thing I would do. Then I would pass legislation to limit the service time for a Supreme Court justice. I'd follow that up with a mandatory retirement age, and I would not grandfather in the current court. So I would say Scalia,
Thomas
and Alito, goodbye. So not only are we gonna pack the court, we're gonna thoroughly erase your margin. And guess what? We're gonna say while we're doing it, elections have consequences. That's right. What we say every time. Elections have consequences. You lost. You got your rear end kicked. Blue tsunami. We're taking this all the way to the bank, and we're doing what we need to do.
Absolutely, and I think that Joe Biden and the Democratic leaders are right in not saying exactly what they're going to do. They don't owe that to Mitch McConnell. No. They don't owe that to the Republicans to telegraph it. They're telling the American people, put us in power and we're going to restore order. And what that means is what it means. And so it'll be, if that does happen, I will want to definitely probably go ahead and buy some stock in a Kleenex company because all the crocodile tears on the Republican side it's going to cause a big shortage in Kleenex.
Right.
Because they're going to be crying, it's not fair, and this has never been done before, and it has been. There's been cases. The Supreme Court's been different number of justices all over time. I even heard one theory where they said, reduce the. You could even the Democrats, if they wanted to, they could reduce the court.
Yeah.
They could say we're actually going to only have 7 justices now. So Kavanaugh and Amy Barrett, you're no longer needed.
Right. I'm not sure. So as far as I know, and looking at the Supreme Court, the times that they've reduced the number is when they've had when one party has controlled the Congress and another party was in the White House and wanted to fill a vacant seat. So Andrew Johnson, who was universally hated by the Congress. I want to say he tried 17 times to fill a seat and didn't get one. I think he's one of 3 people, 3 presidents not to have any Supreme Court justices. But yeah, I mean, if I were the Democrats, once they rush this thing through, I would say, if we win, everything's on the table. We're going to do whatever it takes. I do think that they've been hammering on the fact that the Republicans are pushing this through without doing anything for the pandemic a little hard. I think I would have backed off on that a little bit. And I think I would have hit Judge Barrett a little harder on some things that she actually said and she has written. They haven't really brought her writings in as for as much scrutiny as I think they should have. One thing she did say, and I want to read this quote. She said, "I have no agenda, and I do want to be clear that I have never discriminated on the basis of sexual preference and will not ever discriminate on the basis of sexual preference." Now, if you don't know, the phrase sexual preference is a dog whistle to those that are anti-gay and anti-gay marriage. So the right has a strong contingent that believes that every gay person in America or across the world is gay because they chose to be gay. And every person I know that's gay will tell you that they had no choice in the matter, that from the time they were born, this has been the way they were. And for her to use sexual preference and then later came back and apologized, saying she didn't know that it was an offensive remark is just beyond the pale. I mean, you know, it was offensive. You know, you're 48 years old. You grew up in this LGBTQ era. You knew what you were saying. Just own it. Just,
Yeah.
you know, Trump owns it for the most part. Just say, you know, hey, you know, I believe everybody has a choice. They made theirs and I made mine.
That's right. Yeah. They need to stick up for what they believe and not just to try to hide behind, oh, I can't possibly say anything about what I believe because it might come up as a court case. Well,
Right.
I mean, you could, you know, she's talked overly about her family and about the fact she's adopted children. There could be an adoption case come before the court too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to try to constantly just stonewall and not answer any questions, I think does a real disservice to the process. And I understand that that's happened before on both sides. I've not seen someone be so non-committal, though. I think even Kavanaugh and Gorsuch were more committal on case history and on personal beliefs than she's been. So
Right.
but I'm with you. I think that Democrats have to say everything's on the table.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is they have to damn well come through with it. And if they can't get faint of heart. And you know, one of our past guests sent me a note last night, Dr. Jeff Birdsong, that pointed out in the election of 1888, Republicans did not win the popular vote, and they did win the Electoral College though, and they wanted to have more seats on the more votes in the Senate. And so what did they do? They added North Dakota and South Dakota as states and gained 4 more senators who were Republicans. So there's a long history of this happening. And so we could see statehood finally for Puerto Rico and in Washington, D.C. We could see additional seats on the court. We could see the end of the filibuster, the end of the Electoral College. There's lots of things that could happen. I know the Electoral College will take a constitutional amendment, but it'll definitely be possible if you have a majority and you have a president that's willing to sign it.
Well, it's more than that. A constitutional amendment is going to be hard because it has
to go through the state. You got to get
the states.
I was getting to that. Slow down. I was getting to that, but it's got to get out of DC first.
Right, it has to get out of DC.
So it passes DC. If it, like right now, it would never pass, right? Because you got a Republican Senate, you got a Republican president.
Right.
They want to hold on to the Electoral College all they can. Then you got to go through and get it ratified by 2/3 of the states in order to get the constitutional amendment through. Now, that being said, I will tell you that it's a little bit under the radar this election cycle, but the Democratic Party has been doing a lot of work at the legislature level and really working on flipping chambers of houses that haven't even been thought of in the past. There's a strong chance they'll win the House of Representatives in the state legislature in the state of Arizona, which will be a first time in, I don't know how long, 60 years or something.
Right.
So I'm with you. I think everything's got to be on the table. And I think you're dead on. I think you quote Senator Graham and say elections have consequences. And then I think you also say, to the victor go the spoils. And Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump ran DC this way for the last 4 years. They said that whoever's in power and has this can do whatever they want. And we're going to do it, but we're going to do it for the good of the people.
Right. I just want to throw in here, since you brought it up with Arizona, that Mark Kelly, in a latest poll that was October 7th through the 14th, conducted by Ipsos, which is a pretty respectable polling company. Mark Kelly has an 11-point lead, and former Vice President Biden has a 4-point lead over Trump. So it looks like
yeah.
reliably red Arizona is about to go blue.
I've heard some rumblings that the Trump campaign's getting ready to pull up stakes there.
Yeah.
And try to focus in on Florida and maybe Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. Maybe, and they're having to defend Ohio, and they didn't think they were going to have to.
Well, and let me check Texas. But last I checked, he had a 3-point lead in Texas, which is probably enough for him to, not spend a lot of money there. It's 1.5. So he's probably having to spend some money in Texas, which he probably didn't think he was going to have to spend. If you're the campaign staff trying to figure out what to do, you just got to be pulling your hair out trying to figure out where you're going to get the votes. I think
there's a lot of holes in the dam.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we got the Texas poll open there, but
I do.
Do you have the Senate line on that?
Yeah, give me just 1 second. I think it's big for Cornyn. He's got 2 polls came out through the one came out through the 11th, October 2nd through the 11th by Morning Consult that has him up by 9 over Hagar.
I saw one that came out today that had him only up by 2. I'll have to find the source on that, but
Yeah.
He's had some faux pas. It is interesting that his goal was to kind of avoid MJ Hagar, and
Right.
he's launching his second attack ad now.
Right. I will say that it looks like in Kentucky, Amy McGrath is she's coming up a little bit. She's only down by 7. She was down by 9. Actually, at one point, she was down by 16. I don't think there's enough time to close that gap, especially in a state like Kentucky. But, we'll have to watch that and see how they do.
He had a really bad debate the other night, and it was all like one instance, I think, which is the prime shot that'll be used in her campaign commercials, was where she talked about the fact that when people were dying of coronavirus, he put the Senate on recess and didn't pass a relief bill, and
Right.
the camera cut to him and he was laughing.
Right.
He was like laughing, yucking it up,
That's pretty powerful. I tell you, when people see what these guys are doing that are going to affect their lives, like what Trump's trying to do with Social Security, I mean, these folks are serious about, the one thing they like about Trump is he has followed through on what they've been trying to do for 30, 40 years. And that's kill a bunch of these programs that they think are entitlements, and they want to open up public lands so that, you have hot dog stands, behind every tree, and, ranchers can have their cows out there with no wolves or bears or anything to impede them. And, they want to get that all for little and nothing. I mean, it's just
let's put some strip mines in the Grand Canyon for uranium.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, they, as a person told McCarthy, they have no shame.
Yep. So, it's and don't think for a minute that they won't try. If they're doing this now, before the election, knowing the consequences that could happen, if it's a bloodbath on election day, and the results come in and it is a blue tsunami, don't put anything past what they'll try in the lame duck session.
Oh yeah. Yeah. My guess is they'll put the screws to Thomas and Alito to retire so they can name 2 more justices and get somebody in their 40s in there. They'll probably jam through as many vacancies as there are on the other federal benches. They'll start pressuring people to retire in those. I mean, yeah, you just don't know what what they might do.
Yeah, and I wouldn't put it past Trump not to forgive the payroll tax holiday either, and tell people they got a check due.
Right.
And then try to turn around and say, "Oh, it's Joe Biden doing that to you."
Right.
So, well, hey, it's been a lively conversation. We got into a lot of topics, and that's taken us pretty close to the end of tonight's episode. We're going to be back real soon in the next couple of days with we're going to start a 2-part series where we're going to speak to a really really active Joe Biden supporter about why they're supporting Joe Biden. And then we're also going to speak to a really active Donald Trump supporter and why they're supporting President Trump. We're going to do it on separate podcasts so that there's no interrupting or shouting over each other because we're looking to have a civil discussion on the issues and the things like that. So as we always say, make a plan, get out and vote. Election day is already happening. There's lots of people who've already done their civic duty. We said 10% of the vote from last time to already cast ballots. Get out and cast yours. I always say democracy is not a spectator sport, so do your part.
Right. Amen to that. We'll see you next time.
Everybody take care and stay safe.